Hello, everybody. And I'm going to wait a second while people come in. We've got a bunch coming from the waiting room into the session, and all of my windows have magically shown up in the wrong place. So I'm going to be moving them around now. Okay, so we are here at the May Carrier's Edge webinar. I'm Mark Morrell, president of Carrier's Edge, and I have a very interesting lineup for us all today. So today I am joined by our CEO, Jane Jezraoui, and our director of marketing, Michael Miller, who is brand new to the webinar world, which means that Michael is about to undergo his hazing in the webinars.
Hazing with Jane and
Welcome.
Mark.
Yes, welcome, Michael.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I didn't know about the hazing, so
Yes. Michael
We'll
didn't
find
know what he
out.
was in for.
I suppose I should have expected it.
Yes, and for
Can
those
I
of
just,
you who
can I
have
just,
attended webinars before, feel free to ask him very hard questions. Yes,
can
go
I
ahead,
just
Jane.
say that I didn't realize that Michael has recently joined us, and I didn't realize that I was going to have two MMs to deal with.
Yes.
I
Uh,
find it
so,
irritating.
so we are going to talk today about driver coaching. And so Michael, as a kind of newbie into this specific part of the industry, is kind of in a good position that he can kind of ask because he's sort of coming up to speed on some of these things as well. So he's got some questions to go through on coaching. And Jane and I are going to probably talk over each other and brain dump a whole lot of stuff. Things that we've found through the Best Fleets to Drive For program over the years, the kind of the current state of what's happening in driver coaching, and some things that we've seen with our customers as well. So, Michael, from here, I think I can throw it over to you and you can get us started. So, ask your first question and let's see where it goes.
Terrific. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's great to be here and to talk to you guys about this. I love all things coaching. Everybody needs a coach. I'll just mention though, I mean, if everyone listening, if you guys have questions too as we go through this, drop that into the Q&A and I'll make sure we get those questions up too, because I'm sure your questions will be a whole lot better than mine. But I mean, maybe let's start off with, I mean, coaching can mean a lot of different things. You know, athletes have coaches, senior executives and businesses have coaches. I said earlier, everybody kind of needs a coach. What is coaching all about in the trucking industry? Talk about sort of what it what it means, how it might differ from other industries.
Well, I'm going to start because that will allow me to talk so Mark doesn't interrupt me. It's changed. It's really changed. When, there wasn't a lot of coaching, kind of when we started Best Fleets, I guess we're 17 years, 17 years ago, 10 years ago, coaching was more about helping drivers, like drivers helping drivers, or a safety person going in the truck and helping a driver with backing, or, some other kind of, coupling and uncoupling or something like that. So that's what coaching was. But then when cameras came in, it really, really changed. Cameras became, coaching became only about someone getting information from the camera about someone doing something wrong in a truck, a driver doing something wrong, and then the coach calling that person and talking to them about it or talking to them about the situation. And that has been technology has been really good because now we have that information, but what it has done is kind of broken that relationship of a person talking to a person about helping develop their skills to a, hey, I saw you did this. Hey, I saw you did this. And
Well,
that's,
hang on a second there, Jane. You
yeah.
answered the next five questions as well.
Oh, did
So
I?
those are just teasers for what we're going to talk about. But let's go back to, yeah, what coaching means. Yeah, it used to mean, like you were saying, drivers talking to drivers. So it would be more of a mentoring kind of thing, because it would be occasionally about technical skills or practical application of those skills. And more often, it would end up being lifestyle things like where are best restaurants to go to and places to avoid, or how do you deal with this issue at home when you're on the road. That was what the quote unquote coaching was in a lot of cases. But yes, with the advent of cameras, it has really shifted. And when fleets all of a sudden had a whole pile of data about what drivers are doing on the road, they started realizing that they need to have a more formalized coaching program about sort of correcting those behaviors or correcting those issues that came up. And it has shifted as well from being drivers talking to drivers to safety people talking to drivers. And sometimes now it's other office people that are talking to drivers as well. So that's kind of, I would say, where the current status of coaching programs is that most fleets have got a camera system of some sort. Most fleets have got some kind of coaching that generally is tied to a camera and is primarily triggered by some sort of negative behaviors that are caught on the camera. And most fleets, from the medium and large on up, are at the point where they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we make the most of that? What do we do with those coaches? How do we make sure they're successful? You start with, apologize in advance for a mild digression here. Every time something new comes into the trucking industry, we see this sort of pattern play out where there's something new that comes in, everybody jumps on it. It's great on its own. You see the benefit because now you can get from here up to here, and that's really cool. But then after you're there for a while, you realize, okay, there are some problems with this that we need to address. And that's kind of what's happening in coaching is, okay, well, it's good that we're able to sort of coach on some of these bad behaviors or bad activities on the road, but there's unintended consequences that come out of that as well, because what do we do for the people that aren't having those issues? And then how do we get around the fact that now coaching kind of gets seen as a punishment? And how do we make sure that these coaches are actually interacting or intervening with the drivers in a consistent way that actually does lead to positive change, because not all coaches handle things the same way. So all of those problems start to come up when you get after the sort of initial rush of now we have coaches that are helping people. How do you have success with all of that? And so that's
The
kind of
other,
where we're at
the
now.
the other thing that I see now is that training and coaching are not aligned. So in a lot of companies, there's the online training that you give to drivers every month or every quarter or whatever it is that you do, and it has nothing at all to do with the coaching that's happening with cameras. And that is something that happened, like Mark said, technology comes in and you can sort of see all the things that you can do, but you're going to have a lot more pack to your punch if you can actually have your training aligned with coaching, or get the information from what you find in your coaching programs to actually put into training. So they're not two separate things, and people are treating them like that, and they need to be integrated.
However, there's a caveat to that, that there's a lot of times where training gets assigned to coach an event, and that's not coaching. So that's training being assigned. So, kind of going back to what does coaching mean? Sometimes it ends up that the coaching event just goes immediately to the training, and that's not the same. You want to have the programs aligned. And so an example of that might be looking at the data that is coming from the cameras and seeing what things you're having to coach on, identifying trends, and then doing a larger training program or assigning some training based on that so that they do work together, or doing the training and then having the coaches focus on those areas afterwards. So you're combining that practical and educational element together. But they do need to be aligned, but they're not the same thing for sure.
Yeah, that's there's a lot to unpack. That's after one question too. That's
This is why Michael only needed four
fantastic.
questions for this thing.
Yeah, I only need two. So that's interesting. I want to dig to a lot of that, but I want to maybe take a step back too before doing that and talk a little bit about like how does this differ, or does this differ based on the size of your fleet? Like, is it a different approach for a small fleet than it is for a large fleet? Do the tools differ? Do the approach differ? Or is it, it's human to human, it doesn't matter? How does that all break down?
I think the biggest thing that's going to differentiate a large fleet and a small fleet is resources. So do you have the people? Do you have the tech, like what technology do you have? How much, how much are people already doing? And I think that's about the only difference. You can have a coaching program to go along with your training program in a small fleet, large fleet. It doesn't really matter. We've seen both those things in the Best Fleets program and have them be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. In a small company, you're going to have a coaching program, you're going to have coaches, you want to make sure that they're successful and all those kind of things. In a larger organization, the biggest difference, and it's not really something that's unique to coaching, but the biggest difference is when you have a larger pool of coaches, having consistency and making sure that the program gets managed. So you end up having to manage the managers or manage the coaches and manage that program to make sure that it's successful. But it's the same thing with orientation trainers or regional safety managers. If you've got a large enough organization where you've got all of those different people, you've got multiple people in the role, you need to manage those things and make sure that there's consistency in that. So that's the biggest difference. Now we're at that point where fleets of all sizes have got cameras. Fleets of all sizes have managed to get a coach or two, even very small. Like we see companies with 20, 25 trucks that have a coaching program, and they have a safety person who is doing the coaching, or they have a senior driver who is doing it. They're still putting something together. The basic building blocks don't really change based on fleet size.
Okay, great. And you mentioned, Jane, you mentioned Best Fleets. I got my book here.
Yes,
We
we
all
all
have
have
our
our
rep.
yes, our
That's
best fleet book.
a great segue into what I wanted to ask you next, which, I mean, you guys have some tremendous insights into what's working, what's not, what are best practices from the Best Fleets program. And I'd love to dig into some of that, like sort of, what are some of the best practices in coaching programs that you're seeing out there in terms of, I think of like, how do you deliver it? Is it always punitive? Is it a reaction to something that happens, or is it something else? So like, how often do you do it? You guys can approach that however you want, but I'd love to sort of unpack, what are some of those best practices that everybody online here can sort of take away and implement?
You want to start with that?
Well, I want to start with the coaches. Like I think selecting your coaches, if you want to have a coaching program, you need to have some coaches. So there's a couple of things. You need to figure out who the coaches are, what they're going to be doing, how often they're going to be doing it, and what support that they get. And I
And what
think,
do you expect to get out of it as well?
yes.
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 Sure.
So you can't just sort of say, well, you can say, hey, Frank, you're my senior driver. Can you go out and show, Wanda how to back into this spot properly? You can do that, and that's a really informal way of doing it. And maybe Frank is really, did I say Frank? I don't know if he's now Frank. You can have him do that and have that keep going on and on in a really informal setting. But as you grow, you're going to have to formalize it. So you need to think about what it is that you want to achieve out of that, how to measure it, what the expectations of the coaches are. And then you have to figure out if the coaches are actually have the skills to do it, because just because you know how to do something really well is not necessarily, that doesn't make you the best person for the job.
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually pivot it to bring that question into this because question is about quote unquote self-coaching, sharing the dash cam event with the driver. 100% people should see those things. However, going back to Michael's first question, that's not really coaching. So coaching, looking at sort of the definition of the word, coaching is really somebody else's expertise helping you to develop. So you can't, by definition, do that yourself. Self-improvement is great. Yes, you have to see that. A lot of people will look at that and self-correct, and that's fantastic. But the value of the outside person in there will certainly make a difference to that. That's sharing it. That's great. But that the coach kind of takes it to the next level because sometimes people don't know how to do that. They may see something that they're doing and they may end up coming up with a solution the wrong way. They come up with the wrong solution to the problem, and then you haven't actually made anything better.
And maybe the coach's role in that is not to necessarily do the correction. It is to talk to the driver about the correction.
Mhm.
How is it going with the camera? What are you finding with, with what it's telling you? Do you feel comfortable with it? Do you have any other questions? Because if you leave people alone to kind of figure it out themselves, then what ends up happening is that they don't ask you any questions. They'll just, so
Yeah.
you have to actually go and say, tell me how you're doing it, how you're doing. What is this camera doing for you? What do you not like about it? What improvements can you have? Because coaching can not necessarily, doesn't have to be about you did this wrong, let's correct this. It can also be, how do you feel about this? How do you
Well,
feel?
and going back to the idea of a specific item, a heartbreaking event or a bad turn or something that comes up, the coach in there, it can be very simple, the situation where the driver sees that thing and then the coach says, okay, so we've got this issue. What do you think you could do differently? It's that kind of a discussion. How do you want to solve this problem? And there's a discussion about how best to solve that problem. And then the driver may take the lead on doing that, but the coach is still involved and maybe it ends up being sort of almost like a therapist, sort of kick around some ideas and tell me some different things that you might do to approach it. And, what happens if this happens? What happens if you try that and it ends up this way? And you end up having a deeper discussion about that kind of thing. And through that, the driver ends up getting a solution, figures out what they should be doing. And the coach is sort of given their expertise to help that person not just solve that problem, but have a broader understanding, sort of a bigger worldview of that issue that they can then apply elsewhere. So you don't end up having to coach them on nearly the same thing a month later. So,
So I want to look at some of these questions because I think this is really important. And what I was starting to talk about was the structure. And it's really important that you have expectations of your coaches that they know, follow up with your coaches, and sort of like a constant evaluation. And for coaches to be successful, you need to tell them what they need to be doing, how they are supposed to conduct themselves. And what we have found, or what we see in the best fleets that's really works well is kind of what you're talking about is what Pascal is talking about, which is a coach's expectations. So, but you also have to have somebody who is working with them. So maybe your safety director or someone in the company who is not only giving them expectations, but following up with them on a regular basis to see how it's going. And that whole feedback afterwards. So drivers can give feedback about coaches. Coaches can go back and look and see how drivers have done 6 months later. There are ways to measure how people are doing, and that's often one of the things that people miss out of coaching programs is the leadership of the coaches. So where do the coaches fit in? Do they ever talk to each other? Do they ever share their experiences? They need that. And then also that evaluation. So how did I do? How did the drivers think I'm doing? Why am I doing well or not doing well? And coaches can't be successful if they don't have that same evaluation of their own performance.
yeah.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point. I want to come back to that in a second, but I want to while we're talking about the success of the program here, I want to sort of jump on a question that we've got in the Q&A right now. And if I interpret it right, it's like, how do you overall measure the success of your coaching program? So you've got people, they're having these conversations. It's easy to sort of measure, if a negative behavior is being corrected, but are there other ways that you can know if your broader coaching program is succeeding?
Well, that starts with, in the beginning, having, all of the things that Jane is talking about. What are you trying to get out of it? So you have to set objectives. What are we trying to do here? Well, we want to have a certain number of events that, camera events that are reduced, or safety incidents, or violations. I mean, I think we end up being locked very closely into camera-based coaching, but that's only one small part of it. There's all kinds of other parts of the job that can be benefiting from a coaching relationship or a coaching structure. And so if we are going to have success with it, part of it is thinking, what do we want to achieve with this? What is the objective? And in a lot of cases, if you look at the standard fleet, you have a safety person, safety director, risk manager, whatever. That person kind of knows what they want to do to improve each driver and just does not have the time in a day to do it. So the coaching program kind of becomes a force multiplier. It's a way to get to more people more regularly and address some of those gaps. So you need to start with a plan. You need to start with here's what we want to achieve, and then measure it. And if you're not seeing the results, if the trends are not moving the direction you want, then you have to look into why is that? Is it that the coaches are not effective? Are there things that are happening that are being caused by other elements in the business? So maybe somebody is continuing to speed, but it's because ops is putting a ton of pressure on them to make deliveries, and no coach is going to change that, right? No coach is going to fix that. So you have to sort of address the underlying systemic issues, and it may be that some coaches are more effective than others. There's obviously going to be interpersonal issues, style issues, and I think that gets to something that we wanted to cover in here, which is talking about support for those coaches to help them have success. Once you select those coaches, and like what Jane was saying earlier, once you select those coaches, what do you do to ensure that they're going to be super effective there? Are you giving them training programs? Are you sharing best practices? This is why within our system we built these leadership courses about emotional intelligence and leadership styles, and now difficult conversations and things like that, because there's so many people that are put into these coaching programs that are fantastic drivers in terms of their performance, and they are now being conscripted to be part of the coaching team, but they've spent their lives out on the road on their own. They're not used to leading a team and interacting with people and trying to figure out the best way to communicate something to somebody they don't really know that well. And so there's a whole new set of challenges there. And that's what I was talking about earlier that comes up after you get that up and running, the program up and running. You realize that, okay, well, now we've got to make sure that these people are effective and consistent. And
Can we
so that becomes the issue.
can we go back a little bit to the structure of the program, because I want to talk about the training as well, and how how to select effective people to do this. But going back to the structure of the program and figuring out your objectives. So maybe your objectives is to stop hours of service violations, or maybe you have you've got you keep dinging up your trailers, or drivers keep dinging up the trailers and things like that. So before you even talk about coaches, talking about like what it is, like Mark said, setting objectives and figuring out what the coaches should be doing. I think it's better for people when they know exactly what you want them to do. So if you just say, go and coach people, or go and help people with their logbooks, that's not necessarily it's gonna be harder to measure. But if you say, okay, you need to reach out to, you have 4 drivers. I want you to contact those drivers 3 times over the next 2 months, and I want you to talk to them about X, Y, and Z, or, take them out in the yard and demonstrate X, Y, and Z, and then you sort of report back the results. And then you're going to be able to see everybody's going to be consistent, and you're going to have either you're going to have results or you're not going to have results. And, one of the things that you can do is then you can see if those are there more, do the violations go down or do they not go down? So have the goal, tell coaches what you want from them and exactly how to do it. Like they can also, decide what to do, outside of that and the approach and things like that. And then you can measure it. But what Mark is talking about is also extremely important. How do you, so say you have to figure out who is going to be a good coach and ask them if they want to do it, ask them if they want to commit the time to it, figure out if you want to pay them differently or give them some sort of reward for this. And then give them some training, like give them some leadership training, give them some difficult conversations training, give them some emotional intelligence training, because the more that you know about how well you do something or how you can do something better, especially soft skill, the better the coaches are going to be for your drivers. And the more that they're going to be able to give you good feedback, because you also want the feedback from those drivers. And I
Yeah.
just
Yeah. And I want to
talk
just
to
sort
it.
of jump on top of that a little bit with if you're starting a coaching program, don't start with, especially if you're in a larger fleet, don't start with everybody. Like, don't try to boil the ocean, as the consulting phrase goes. Start small and pick a couple of groups. Maybe pick one terminal or one small team or one particular customer. Or make it small. Figure out those kind of things within your organization and figure out, how do we pick people that are going to be really useful or really effective here? All right, we know what we're doing with that. Then we move it out to a broader group, and eventually you get a larger team as part of it. And I think that leads a little bit into Stephen's question about ops not supporting. Do we see a trend of ops not supporting the safety coaching? And that's one of the questions where I think, Stephen, you're asking a question, you already know the answer to that. We all know the answer is yes. Um, but it's like everything else, where if if you just sort of dump it on people and say, okay, we're going to start doing this, and it's a big change, it's an interruption and a headache for them, then yeah, you're going to get pushback and it's going to be harder. So that's why there's value in starting small, getting people on side. Definitely leadership needs to be on side on this thing. So here's what we're trying to achieve. If there are budget changes because you're going to be paying them for it, or if there's operational changes because you're going to be pulling some people out of some routes periodically, get the buy-in from the executive on that this is what we're trying to accomplish, start small and build on it, and then make it as easy as possible for the operations, keep them in the loop so that they know what's going on and they see the value of it, and make it clear what you need from them so that they're not sort of wondering what's going on. Generally, they will come around. There's value for them as well. A better driver, a safer, more productive, more efficient driver is better for ops. It's not just safety. So everybody wins in that scenario. And especially if it's somebody that can be coached from weak performance into acceptable or strong performance, that's better for ops because then they don't have the disruption of somebody leaving the company. So it wins sort of for everybody.
Yeah.
And forgive me, with ops, like sometimes they just don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just a communication thing.
Yeah.
Uh, Pascal had a good question. Is the challenge sometimes is having coaches tending to infantilize drivers? And this is part of expectations and training, I think. One of the things that you can do to evaluate the coaches is not just have the office staff or the safety team evaluate the coaches, but send out surveys. Have it as a 360 evaluation. You're a coach, but the people who are being coached you should let they should have an opportunity to say how they felt about it. And then that can be then put into, if you're meeting, you should be meeting regularly with the coaches, and then you can talk about it, you can address it. And it doesn't have to be that, oh, Fred said this and George said this. It could be this is how to do it better. So we've had some feedback and let's work on this, because people are not doing it on purpose. They're doing it because they don't know how to do it. And it is hard
Yeah.
when you're teaching someone about something that you know really, really well. It's absolutely easy to talk down to other people about it. It's like, oh yeah, well, that's really,
Well, it
that's
can also be a couple of
so
other things.
easy.
Right.
Was
It
that
can also be that they're not supported, like with the, they're not prepped in terms of the education, like what you were saying. It was they not don't really know what's expected. But it can also be that not everybody is a great coach. There are some people that are fantastic performers, terrible coaches, terrible educators, and there are some people. This is the counterintuitive thing, but it's important to recognize. There are some people that are only mediocre performers, but are fantastic coaches. Sometimes the people that are the best teachers are not the best practitioners. And I know there's an old joke about that, that the people who can't do teach, but that's really undervaluing the educator part of it. And there's some people that can really find the right recipe for each person and help them and coach them. And they may not be amazing themselves. They have to be good enough. They have to be people that are not in the doghouse all the time, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the person who is the absolute best performer that becomes the coach. It can be somebody who's got more
or
left.
or it doesn't have to be that every coach does all things.
Ah,
And
excellent point. Going back to
have a
structuring the
backing coach.
program.
Yeah,
Yep.
you can have a load securement coach. You can have hours of service coach. Like if you have people who are really, really good at a specific thing, then utilize that. It doesn't
And
have
so
to be
that is a
a pack.
whole other thing that we are starting to see as these programs mature. And we're seeing what some of the best fleets are doing in that area is recognizing that it isn't this coach is for these 20 people, this coach is for this terminal. It may be this coach is for this subject area, this coach is for this other subject area. You may have somebody who is fantastic at hazmat and just knows hazmat inside and out. Okay, that's your hazmat coach. Somebody else that is the guru of air brakes, that's your air brakes coach. I mean, you can do it that way. So look at it in a variety of different ways to see what fits the organization.
And see what people want to do because it might be that people don't want to do it for very long. They'll do it for 3 months, but then they're done with it because people get burned out. And coaching is, and same with teaching, same like when you're doing that person to person interaction, um, it can be exhausting, evidence. Sometimes you just don't want anybody in your truck anymore, and it's like, go away, give me a break. But I think utilizing, figuring out, because we've been talking a lot about people, but there's the technology is there as well. So figuring out how your fleet can best use the technology along with the expertise of your drivers or your safety team is going to be really where it can really work. Because you want to take what you're seeing on cameras or what you're seeing from the driver behavior and match it with some sort of coaching opportunity and to get a result. So you don't necessarily want to have people just generically going off and coaching people. You want to be a little bit more specific, especially at the beginning, because you want to see what works.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna pull in a question we've got in the Q&A from Elton here, which I think you were kind of talking to, but I mean, is it more effective or is it more common that you're coaching around a specific type of behavior you're noticing and an issue that you're trying to address coming from the technology versus more general holistic coaching? Like is there a better path? Should we be doing both? Should we be focusing more on one? Am I making any sense?
So looking at the question, following drivers around without them knowing helps us understand speed, severe driving events. Well, I mean, you're kind of doing that with the telematics and the camera stuff. It's capturing all of that stuff now anyway. I don't think there's any driver that isn't really being documented in their activities. And there are services that do that. I remember one service that you would contract with them and then they would have people kind of sitting at the side of the road in the lanes that you run to watch your trucks going by and see what they're doing. And all of that stuff, it really comes down to how you communicate it with your drivers. If you are doing it to spy on your drivers because you don't trust them, that's going to be a hard sell. That's not going to go over very well. But if it's positioned as all of us get into habits that we don't even realize that we're doing, and having another set of eyes to help catch that, avoids problems down the road if it's positioned more that way. Like, we all do things without even noticing it, and this is how we help to identify that. That's going to be a little bit easier to get buy-in for. But I think that's also going to be a challenge in terms of resourcing. Like, how are you going to find people to have the time to do that? How much are they actually going to catch? I mean, technology does that and does it uh, in a much better way, although we are still flooded with false positives where the technology tells you all these things that are happening that really weren't issues. So we still have a long way to go in that, but it is it is getting better. We are sort of moving in a direction which is good there.
I think that the idea, it is like Mark said, it is about positioning, and you have to position coaching in a particular way that doesn't make people feel like it's an insult. There's a lot of pride amongst drivers, and it's a tough job. So having that respect is part of the approach. So instead of saying, you position it as everybody can learn something, we can all do better, and sort of introduce the program that way instead of saying, you need help, you can't do this, so go have a coach. So you have to think about how you want, and this is part of the goals of the program. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? And if it's to make drivers safer and, better equipped to, or have better their skills so they can actually progress in their career to maybe another piece of equipment or, something where they can make more money, then that's going to be a much more positive thing than the sort of punitive way that people look at coaching and training. It tends to be punitive, and you can turn it around really easily. We think of it as punitive because people have to do something wrong before you're thinking about training. But instead of, but you want to be proactive instead of reactive, and you want to have a positive spin on it, and people will absolutely be way more responsive. And you can use questionnaires, surveys, anonymous surveys to get feedback about that approach. Like, are people feeling okay about it, or do they want to do it some other way? So you have to do a constant set of communication, and you can use technology to do that. But you have to keep the human part of it, because technology only is what's driving people away.
So hang on a second, because you opened up something there, and I want to get into it, which is you're talking about um, something else that we had on the list that we wanted to talk about is that coaching doesn't need to only be initiated by somebody screwing up. That's where you get into this coaching as punishment, training as punishment, because you only get it if you do something wrong. What we have started seeing in the past couple of years is that the top scoring fleets in the Best Fleets program, the top scoring fleets in this area have coaching that everybody gets, recognizing that everybody can get better at something. So they have a program where every driver gets some sort of coaching intervention. And maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's twice a year, maybe it's annual, depending on what the schedule allows. But the idea that everybody's going to get something, and we just focus on where you're relatively weakest. You might still, in absolute terms, be perfectly fine, but relatively speaking, there's going to be one bit of the performance that's lower than the others. What can we do on that? When it's positioned like that, there's a lot of opportunity for people to really grow with it.
Couple of things on that. You can also ask drivers what they want,
Mm,
because they know what they're not good at.
mhm.
And you can say, we've got coaching on A, B, C, and D this quarter. What are you interested in doing?
Yeah.
And don't give them the option to say no. Just give them the option to say, this is a really, really effective thing, is don't give people the option to say no if you want them to buy into something. Just give them, and I do it with my kids or my grown, but it works. It's like, okay, do you want broccoli or Brussels sprouts? Like,
Right. You get
choose.
one of them, so you get to pick.
But
Yes.
same thing, if people are reluctant to do coaching, give them a choice of four things to work on. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was that in terms of, oh crap, I think I've forgotten it now. But
Okay.
okay, so we can move on to, because
Let's
I
let's answer the question.
Yes.
Uh, and so this is one where Jane won't say much about this. I certainly will. What advice do you give a coach who is not comfortable having hard conversations? Well, funny you should ask that because we are just about to launch a course on difficult conversations, specifically to help with that situation. This is not an uncommon issue in trucking that people, like I said earlier, they don't have a lot of leadership experiences. They're not expert negotiators, and they don't have amazing communication style. So we have a course that's going to help people with that. I would definitely advise doing that. And then it's a matter of sort of going through it and talking about what are the things that are concerning, what are some tips that you could be using to help get through it, all of those kind of things. Yeah, I'll make a plug, but we are definitely
I like
yes,
that.
yes.
You
There
must
are some
become a
things, yeah,
yes.
some things that you're never going to be comfortable with. But how do you deal with that, right? How do you deal with those kind of things and not end up full of anxiety and stressed all the time?
Well, I just remembered what I had forgotten to say, which is in terms of coaching, it doesn't just have to be drivers. It can be if you were going to try and approach it as everybody can learn something, then coaching for your office staff is not a bad idea. We find that the best fleets often have mentoring programs that are, within the office staff. Sometimes there's mentoring between office staff and drivers, which I think this doesn't happen very often, and I think it's a really powerful thing to do, is have onboarding mentors actually be office staff as well as another driver, because the office staff get a lot of benefit out of that because they learn a lot about what the driver is going through. If they are checking in with them, as they onboard, uh, and even when it's not just an onboarding thing, it's an ongoing thing. If you have office staff talking to drivers about something other than whatever their role is, it can be really illuminating for those people. But I think the office staff could also benefit from coaching. And they don't have cameras, obviously, but mistakes come up and people have issues with dispatchers, and figuring out, if dispatchers are having difficulties talking to drivers, then maybe they need a coach. The other thing about the difficult conversations is, yes, we are going to have a course shortly. It's nearly ready.
And it's a good question. What's the title? Is it just called Difficult Conversations?
It is called Difficult
Okay.
Conversations.
So it'll be easy. It'll be easy to find. And we'll put it in the blog so you'll all get
Yeah.
notices when it goes out.
But it really is based on, it's actually a good idea to do emotional intelligence first, because it kind of gives you an idea. Sorry, not emotional intelligence, but leadership styles. Because there are different ways that people tend to want to talk to each other. And coaching is, there are certain ways of talking to people that you don't want to do in a coaching environment. If you're just giving people orders because that's how you want to, it's like this and this and this, and this is the only way to do it. That's not really a good coaching style. So that course, the leadership styles, actually talks a lot about communication styles and how people are, and you can do a self-assessment. So self-assessments are really, really good for anybody who's involved in coaching, so you can see how you come across to people. But the other thing is that the difficult conversations course kind of talks about the types of styles so a coaching style of leadership is going to be better than for a difficult conversation, because you don't want to scare people and you don't want to turn them off. You want to have a conversation that's going to be beneficial. And so we talk about how to do that. We talk about all the difficulties of having a conversation and how to sort of break everything down, because that's really how you achieve it, is that you kind of go with the smallest steps. No one wants to have a difficult conversation, so how do you prepare for it? What are the questions that you ask? What are the things that you should already know? How are you not going to make the situation worse? These are all things that we talk about in the course, because when you're trying to teach people, or when you're trying to, correct people's behavior, all of these things are like, you probably know they can happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just said that's and I love that what you were saying earlier too about the coaching for people other than drivers, because that it makes me wonder about like the coaches themselves. I mean, and this is sort of a two-part question I'm going to throw back to you. I mean, do, what does coaching for coaches? Do you coach the coaches? Are there fleets out there that we've seen that are, have coaching programs for the coaches? And then the second part of that is, can anyone coach? I mean, you know, can you train, can you coach anybody to become an effective coach, or do you need to have some sort of innate ability to really excel in that role?
I
Well,
think
that is a bit of a
okay. Hmm.
that's a bit of a philosophical question. And I think I would kind of shortcut the answer by saying there are definitely going to be that people in any fleet that are better suited to it than others, and start with those. Right? Start with the ones where there are obvious things. Then, if you need more coaches and you are really committed to a coaching program and you want to try turning people into coaches and building them, absolutely you can, but you're going to be better off. In trucking, there's always a million things you're trying to do, and never enough time to do it. So I would say focus where you can get the wins. Focus on the people that are going to be more likely to have success with it. And absolutely, yes, you need to coach them. That really tends to be under the safety director's responsibility to sort of meet with and that's why the committee of coaches is good, sort of get them together to share their own tips, and then give them guidance that way. But they definitely need to be supported with that kind of that sort of leadership. And there are some times where coaching activities really benefit from having not just the coach, but the coach and the safety director. They're sort of in there on the event together, and you'll have better success with those.
Awesome. So there's a specific question in the Q&A too that I'll sort of pull out, and I'm wondering if this I'll read the question first. So do you have any tips on coaching for following distances? This is by far the largest amount of coaching events that I am seeing. So I mean, are there specific things that you may have about that? But I guess also curious to know, does the approach to coaching change based on the issue?
It's funny because I was going to say you can kind of follow the same recipe for anything. In terms of, finding an issue that you need to coach for. Mark, did you want to start?
Oh yeah. I'm smirking at this question because I'm
I'm
like,
thinking, I'm
I'm very
thinking,
eager to
are
get
we talking
going.
about the 401 corridor?
No, I would bet dollars to donuts that this is not an individual driver issue. If you are having somebody who needs coaching, or you're having a whole bunch of people that need coaching on following too close, I would bet that there's something else going on. So the approach then is a consultative thing of looking at, why are you doing this? What is this following too closely happening on a regular basis? And we see this regularly, and it ends up being pressure from operations to get there quicker, trip planning issues where they haven't left enough time and they're backed up, and so they're behind and they're trying to catch up, or some other stress that is pushing people to try and get more, just ride the bumpers of everybody to try and get there. And no coaching will fix that. You can coach people all day and all night about how they shouldn't do it. It's not changing the underlying issue. You have to fix the systemic issues, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier. You have to take advantage of the coaching to find those systemic issues. The coaches can be massively valuable in uncovering broken process within the company, but then you have to sort of take that away from the coaches and go out to the other departments or whatever else is happening to solve those other problems. And at that point, the coaching will tend to take care of itself. You won't need to be on top of the following distance so much because it will address itself.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I had the same response is that something else is going on. And
Yeah.
what happens when you have it always starts with one or two. One or two things happen, you're like, oh, okay, well, we should probably talk to that person and deal with that. It's a one-on-one thing. And then it starts becoming irritating to you because you're like, okay, I've already talked to 5 different people about this. And then you kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, I can't even. What is happening? And that's the point where it stops. Well, when you start noticing a pattern, that's when you should stop coaching and start, well, deal with people on an individual basis as you need to. But that's when you have to start thinking about what is the systemic problem. Something is happening here. And we've had, this happens all the time. We've heard stories in best fleets where, you know, um, I remember Boyle was talking about dinging, getting into fixed objects collisions, and they focused on that for a while and got that down because they had all kinds of stuff happening and they were just annoyed by it, as you tend to be.
Mhm.
But we've had things like that internally where everybody is doing something wrong, and it's not everybody. It's that the process is wrong or something is broken, and we will go and fix that process so that we don't have to go and correct 50 people um, every
Yeah.
day on how to upload something.
Well, it may also be, in not knowing the specifics of the situation there, it may be that there is one person or two people, and it isn't necessarily a systemic problem, but it's people that have at that point, some sort of a knowledge gap somewhere else. And it may be that they don't really understand how to plan their trips, or they aren't accounting for traffic in particular ways, or there's something else that's happening. They may have a personal issue that's creating a lot of stress for them. Like there's going to be something there, but the approach still ends up being the same thing, where you've got to sort of be the consultant and try and figure out what's going on, the old diagnose before you prescribe kind of thing. Um, yeah, so
I like this question.
Okay, you handle that one, Jade.
Okay. The question is, what is, in your opinion, the best way to coach a driver who uses their safe driving record as a justification to ignore those risky behaviors we try to correct? This is not a knowledge problem, it's a behavior problem.
It's an
Like
attitude problem,
it's an attitude problem.
right?
So you have to stop. That's a conversation, that's a difficult conversation, unfortunately.
Well, I would also say, like, I'm looking at my attendee list, and I know that we've got some of our insurance partners here who are jumping at that question because their answer is going to be just because you have a safe driving record doesn't mean you're an amazing driver. It just means you haven't hit anything yet. Or you've been lucky that when you had that bad turn, there was nothing in the way. Like safe driving, yeah, it's fine, but don't hang your hat on it because it's a matter of when. If you have bad behaviors, they're going to catch up to you. Just because they haven't yet doesn't mean that you're golden. It means you've been
And there's
lucky and your luck's going to run out.
There's a lot of studies that show that, and I think you can find them very easily just Googling it, that there are risky behaviors that will lead to an accident. And that is something that you can convey to people as that, yeah, you're fine, like what Mark said, you're fine now, but you are exhibiting you're running stop signs, you're braking too hard, you're doing all of these things that indicate that you're gonna have a collision. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be the person on the other end of the phone after you have a collision. So you can either, do this or not do this, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah,
And,
you position it as I don't want to have that conversation with your family when you don't come home because of that
oh,
risky
yeah.
behavior, right? And you sort of turn it around that way. But yes, the data point is good. ATRI has that data and they publish it all the time. Uh, it's free. There's all of the stats and the data that you need on that one. Yeah, what do we got? Oh, Pascal, another one. Is
Pascal's
it
got a great question. Thank you.
okay? Is it a good idea to show the difference of performance between someone not having issue on safety distance and driving, feeling in rush and tailgate? Most of the time, the one does not have safety issue has better mileage. Not
Hey, can
named, but
I can I
using.
do that? Because I have an answer,
Yes, go
and
ahead.
then you can chime in. But what I would say is I would do it as a comparison and do it as a safety at a safety meeting. or a driver meeting or something like that, where you get those comparisons of if you are doing proper following distance, this is what happens, and this is how you can plan. Like if you plan your trip and do proper following distance, then you will get places on time. This is based on a real example, and then have another example where it's not planned. You're not going using the fuel network. You're doing all of the things that you're not supposed to do, and you end up feeling like you have to follow too closely. And when you have the discussion about the two situations, you can show that you change your behavior here, then you don't have to follow too closely. So instead of just coaching people on saying, don't follow so closely, don't follow so closely, give them a bigger perspective on what this means in your job in the bigger picture. What would you say, Mark?
Yeah, I would say exactly that. And I would add on to it that take it farther if you can, all the way to their earnings. Because usually there's going to be some correlation between those different behaviors and how much money people are making with your various safety bonuses, fuel bonuses, whatever the case may be, the way you structure your comp package. Take those all the way to the end. The good driver's making this much, the not so good driver's making this much. Which one do
And
you want to do?
this kind of comes into another kind of coaching, and people tend to talk about it when they're coaching owner operators or independent contractors, is how much money you can talk to drivers. And we've talked about bringing drivers in for a review either annually or quarterly or semi-annually, whatever, and talk about their performance and say, you know what, you could make more money if you made these changes. And that's a coaching thing where the safety director or someone on the safety team or HR or somebody can help drivers, increase their bottom line. And that's going to be how to change your behaviors to make more money. And that is something that you can do as an individual work plan. Like it can be something that you can do with every driver. And that will definitely make them feel like a name, not a number. That is for sure.
Mhm. So we are fast running out of time here, and there's one other part of it that I want to make sure that we cover because we've gone through a lot of the things that people should do and not do. But there's one thing that I think is important that I do want to talk about, and that is documenting what happens in the coaching program. So this is something that people sometimes don't think about. And I know, Michael, that was one of your questions about things that they should do or things they should avoid doing. But one of the potential gaps in a program is to have these coaches that are doing all of these things and not be tracking what's happening. So why is that an issue? It's an issue when your insurance comes by, and it is absolutely an issue if you end up on court and you've got a court case. You want to be able to show what's happening and all of the interventions that you do. Yes, you kind of plan for the court case and you get the benefits elsewhere along the line. But if you document all of the things that are happening, all of the coaching activities that you're doing, it will be tremendously helpful in a court case where you have to show all of the efforts that you made to help that driver have success, to teach them the right way of doing things, and all of the notes. But it also gives you the ability to measure your program a lot more effectively, because now you can look at it and say, okay, well, we've got this data that we can go back and review. When we are trying to evaluate the effectiveness of the program, which coaches are better than others, being able to track that is very helpful. Even if it's just sort of road test type stuff, yard skills kind of things, have some sort of documentation that you can put into the driver's file. And in our system, you can track all of those practical activities. It is very helpful to have that documentation and evidence. So it isn't just some driver got a course on defensive driving 2 years ago and that was it. Well, they got that course, but we also have this as part of our annual coaching program. We've worked with them on these issues. You've got a much better story. So I want to make sure that we get that covered as well, because I know that's something that is just starting to happen. People are getting these programs together, and it's just starting to occur to them that they should be documenting all of those interventions with the coaches.
Even if you have, a form that, both people sign after a session, and then you
Yeah.
can upload that, or, that kind of thing. It's really important. There was a question about where to get
The best
this
leads book.
Best Leads
Yes.
book, and I put it in the chat.
Yeah.
So
And
Best Leads,
also, yes, the hard
scroll to the
copies
bottom.
we give out hard copies at all the events that we're at, but yes, the soft copy, it's the same book. You can get it from the website right now. Absolutely.
bestleadstodrivefor.com, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there always a recording. We'll always send that out. So I know Mark and I talk blah, 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 so there's lots of stuff in there.
Yes. Smith System, yeah, great product, great system for going through and doing that sort of coaching as well. And I think that's going to bring us to the end. So I will get up the final slide here. Thank you all for coming, and I think we're done.